the Stephen Rowan Show.
It's Stephen Rowan.
Stephen Rowan.
Stephen Rowan.
Stephen Rowan.
Bringing you
Entertaining and inspiring guests.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Stephen Rowan Show. Today's guest has a CV like you wouldn't believe. Stick with me as I get through it, or you can skip forward 15 minutes. We're joined the show today by MP Paul Sweeney. He's born and raised in Glasgow. He studied at the University of Stirling, gaining a certificate of higher education with distinction in economics and political science. Before continuing his degree at the University of Glasgow, he graduated with a first-class MA Honours in Economic History and Political Science in 2011, achieving the prize for Best Joint Honours Performance in Economic History, including a research project in the post-war economic development of Yarrow Shipbuilders, the Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company, and Upper Clyde Shipbuilders. He is an honorary life member of the Glasgow Universe Dialect Society. He is also a trustee of the Glasgow University's Union Board of Management. At the age of 17, Paul joined the Army Reserve, initially serving in the Royal Corps of Signals with 32 Signal Regiment, before transferring to 52nd Lowland, 6th Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. He's currently one of 3 Labour MPs to have served in the British Armed Forces. After undertaking an internship with BAE Systems at HMNB Portsmouth as an undergraduate, Sweeney joined the company's graduate development programme with BAE Systems Maritime Naval Ships in 2011, based at the Govan and Scotston shipyards in the Clyde, where he undertook a series of roles in production engineering and shipbuilding operations management on the Type 45 destroyer, Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carrier and Type 26 frigate programmes. Whilst at BAE Systems, Sweeney also initiated a project with the Glasgow School of Arts Digital Design Studio to introduce virtual reality methods into complex warship design and construction. At the end of 2015, Sweeney joined the National Economic Development Agency Scottish Enterprise as a senior executive, working with the leadership of companies across the defence, marine, shipbuilding, aerospace and engineering sectors. In April 2016, he was elected as a council member of the Institution of Engineers and Shipbuilders in Scotland. Sweeney joined the Labour Party at the age of 16 and first became an active campaigner during the 2009 Glasgow North East by-election. Paul Sweeney joined the Labour Party at the age of 16 and first became an active campaigner during the 2009 Glasgow North East by-election. While working in the shipyards, he joined the Unite and GMB trade unions, later joining PCS while at Scottish Enterprise. He is also on the executive committee of the Scottish Fabian Society. Paul came to prominence during the 2014 Scottish independence referendum after he organised an open letter signed by young shipyard workers opposing the breakup of the UK, and subsequently spoke at the rally alongside Gordon Brown on the eve of the referendum. In the 2017 general election, he stood for Glasgow North East, where a 12% swing to Labour led to him defeating Anne McLaughlin of the SNP. On the 3rd of July 2017, he was appointed by Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn as a Shadow Under-Secretary of State for Scotland. He made his maiden speech to the House of Commons on the 13th of July 2017, during which he expressed his opposition to Tory austerity policies that had led to a fall in living standards. During the 2017 Scottish Labour leadership election, Paul endorsed Richard Leonard, who was ultimately the successful candidate. Paul, and now you can say you've been a guest in the Stephen Rowan Show. Welcome.
Thank you. Definitely a highlight.
How does it feel to hear that formidable resume being read out?
A bit embarrassing, really.
Why do you say embarrassing?
I don't know. It's just, I suppose, a cultural cringe, I suppose, in Scotland, where you don't like to have your achievements read back to you. But no, it's been a fairly swift few years in various different jobs.
That's enough for 4 men, right there.
Maybe, yeah. But I definitely say I've had a few jobs outside of politics, I suppose, which is fairly atypical for modern politicians.
So, for those of you that have listened to the show before, you'll know that the subject of the male suicide epidemic is one that's close to my heart, and the one in society that I think we need to talk about, and that's why we're here to talk to Paul. Paul, you took a very public stand when you spoke to the Daily Record, saying that the recent surge in soldier suicides may only be the tip of the iceberg, and you accused the defence chiefs of failing to support our troops. Can you tell me about your experience in the armed services?
Yeah, I mean, I first joined up to the Army Reserves when I was 17 years old. I mainly did it just because it was an interesting opportunity to spend some time over the summer holidays earning a bit of money. It sounded more interested in stacking shelves in a supermarket. So I went off and did a 7-week training course up in Inverness, which was called Summer Challenge. And that was my first entry into the armed forces. did it just because a couple of pals were going to do it because their brother had already been in the reserve. It sounded like a cool idea. I went off and did it. And it was a great character building opportunity for me. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. Particularly for a young person, it does great things for your confidence and your ability to sort of think critically under pressure. It's very character building, puts you out of your comfort zone. So I found it a really exciting opportunity, and it stood me in great stead. So I've was heavily involved in the reserves when I was at university, and when I started to become, when I graduated and started to become more professionally engaged, it became more difficult to spend time in the reserves. So the last few years I've not really been that actively involved, and I've just finished 12 years officially with the reserves this year. So that's me kind of finished up with them now, because it's just impossible to commit to doing it whilst you're a member of Parliament, really, especially with a very small majority.
Yeah.
But it has been one of the best things I've ever done. Not without its challenges, but a great opportunity for lots of people.
So the article in the Daily Record about the suicide with the troops and the veterans, how did that come about?
Well, it's an issue that the Daily Record raised with me, and they said, well, you're a member of Parliament who has had experience of, being in the reserves, so could you tell us a bit about your understanding of what the issues are? And I related some experiences that I've had with friends and others, people that I've known who have been impacted by it, and also my take on what we need to do to try and address the issue. It's something that as a society we don't really engage with very well, and also from a Ministry of Defence point of view, I think it's a sort of issue that they would like to think doesn't exist to the extent that it does, or that if it does exist, it's something that charities and people of goodwill should deal with on a pro bono basis, rather than it being something that they're obliged to, from a moral point of view, to deal with.
So what steps do you think that we need to take to tackle this issue? Because although it's in, we have hard men, we have strong men that are in the armed services.
Yeah.
What steps do you think we need to take to fix this?
I mean, it needs a much more robust way of managing people leaving the armed forces. I mean, in the last 15, 20 years, there's been about 100,000 people have served in active theatres of war. I wasn't one of them. I didn't go off on an operational tour to an active combat zone, but I had plenty of friends who did. And they're all now having to deal with their experiences that have affected them in different ways. Some are fine with it, others aren't fine with it. But I think we need a much more robust approach to dealing with it, particularly when people leave active service. They leave the regimental family, if you like, or that close support network they might have as part of a well-trained, well-integrated group of people, well-motivated group of people, and are then entering into a civilian career or into a different life. The transition from that kind of institutionalised sort of relationship can be quite difficult for people to deal with. So I think there should be a much more systematic approach to supporting them. My idea would be something like a national veterans service, where there's a single point of interface for everyone to access. There's a myriad of charities and support organisations out there, and it just depends sometimes on your luck or whether you get anywhere with some of them, if you don't know that they exist or not. So it can be quite complex for veterans to get engaged and get the support they need at the right time, the right place. And I think having a comprehensive service would be helpful. But also even looking at how we manage the change from particularly regular service into civilian life, that can be quite a challenge. But also in terms of reservists, that can be some of the most challenging aspects, because they'll be totally immersed in serving for like 8 months to a year, and then they'll just be kind of go back to their normal civilian job without the support network they might have if they're a regular soldier. So they could be doing more work with them as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to sort of make it better. So I think it's a very timely moment when we've seen this spate of tragic suicides that have occurred in the last few weeks, to cast a light on this and say, right, this is something we need to look at very carefully, understand the extent of the problem, because I don't think it's well recorded. The registrars of Scotland don't actually record whether people have committed suicide were veterans at any point, so the true scale of the problem may not be well understood. It's only if people happen to know them through service and peer groups that might identify that actually they were affected by it as a result of their military service.
Which seems, it just seems unbelievable that these guys are having to go through the stresses and strains of, coming back into civilian life. They they take their own life, but there just doesn't seem to be enough support for them. Was mental health discussed among the ranks between you and your peers, or from your superiors?
Not in an obvious way, really, and it's not something that people like to talk about. I think an element of therapy for people is to talk a lot about their experiences and to reminisce on a lot of their experiences. Every so often you'll get together with pals and it'll be a topic of discussion. You'll go back over old stories about various things that have happened. One of my friends who was killed in Afghanistan, our group of friends will get together at least once a year and we'll sort of, we'll try and commemorate them in some way or talk about our experiences with them, and that can help, in many ways, but it's an issue that often people won't deal with in a direct way. Sometimes it can be very informal. Like in the last few weeks, there's been a Facebook group set up to support veterans from the Royal Regiment of Scotland, which has been, highly effective at engaging people that might have now returned to civilian life and they're looking for help, or they're looking to reach out to people that they might have lost touch with, just for a bit of support and a bit of encouragement. And I think that's a helpful way of assisting people on one level. But it's clear there's a massive gap there, and I think it's an issue that the Ministry of Defence could do a much more robust job of dealing with.
I think one of the things that concerns me is that if you were to, whether it be the reserves or whether you're going to join the full services, you go in and you walk in off Civvy Street, and you spend a huge amount of time, maybe 28 weeks, to go through basic training. Might be less, it might be more. But then, of course, at that point, you're going to go on and you're going to specialise in something. You'll join the paratroopers or the Special Port Service or the Marines. You're going to go and do more and more training. But it seems to me that when you come out, that you decide that you want to leave because your time's up, and then when you go, it's like...
Yeah, the Army's generally, it's a highly organised and highly regimented existence, so you'll do your basic training and then you'll join a regiment of some sort or a unit of some sort, and then you'll enter into a routine that's generally constantly training. And then you may well be involved at some point in an operational theatre, or you may well be involved in overseas exercises and all various other aspects of what it involves being a regular soldier. For reservists, it's generally you'll do equivalent of 27 days training a year, which can include going to a drill night once a week, which accounts for, say, a quarter of a day or half a day. And then you can do weekends, which account for 3 days. And then you usually do a 2-week annual camp, and that will be split with your civilian career. So you'll often see that tempo if a reservist is deployed, they'll then essentially become a regular for that duration, and embed into that culture. But I think the biggest challenge a lot of people have is having gone from an environment, sometimes from the age of 16, from the Army Foundation College, being in a regular unit, served for up to 22, 23 years sometimes, going from that existence into then having to sort of have a house, have a civilian career, have to sort of do all the planning involved with living in civilian life. Sometimes it can be quite a stressful thing for people to transition into. And I think that support network needs to be looked at to see if it could be doing better with supporting that transition, particularly as the Army's downsized significantly in the last 5 years, with the recent defence reviews have reduced the Army from over 100,000 to just about 80,000. So there's been a significant outflow of regular soldiers, much more so than usual. We have to look at how that's been managed as well, and how these people are transitioning. So there's lots of things we could do. The government have currently just passed the Armed Forces Flexible Working Bill, which is an idea of making the transition from regular to reserve service easier, so people can maybe transition but maintain contact, depending on what stage of life they're at. Maybe if someone wants to go into paternity leave or maternity leave or study, gives them an opportunity for flexibility, which is a good thing. But I think there's much more we could be doing to look at this problem and how we engage veterans and make sure they're doing all right.
I think when you go into the Army, and this is obviously me speaking to someone that's never been in, but there does seem a point of when you go in, you have your own identity, and then you become part of a machine. But of course, then when you leave, it's hard for you to get your sense of purpose back. Do you think that perhaps Army needs to think about how they're how they're deprogramming the soldiers when they're coming out to give them a sense of self. And I mean, I know there's a thing, you know, when you go in, then you become more than perhaps you were, but I also feel that perhaps those skills aren't quite as highly valued in civilian life.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's as far as sort of dehumanising or depersonalising. So I think there's plenty of characters in there, you know, that are highly individual people. But like, yeah, I think the biggest challenge is making sure that people are making the transition in a productive way. You know, there could be opportunities. I think we could go much further in terms of offering free tuition, free learning opportunities for for particularly younger people to make the transition. Because a lot of people will go in and they'll maybe only do 5 years or so, and then leave again after doing an operational tour of some sort. You know, so a lot of them will be looking to move on to different things in their lives, and it's about just giving people a sense of purpose. You know, there'll also be people who have done 22 years but will leave maybe in their late 40s, early 50s. They might then find they're no longer useful members of society, and they struggle to cope with that transition. They'll be looking for jobs, they'll struggle to get jobs. They're at an age where it's difficult to be employed. We've seen that legacy from deindustrialisation, where there's whole communities that when a factory closed down, it's generally people who were maybe, you know, only 10, 15 years away from retiring. They're kind of in that awkward spot where they're too old to be employed in something new, but too young to retire.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes a really difficult transition for a lot of people to make. So we need to look at that. And often going from a position where you've been highly valued and highly respected as a senior, NCO or a sergeant major or something like that, to then being sort of cast out and not feeling valued or, you know, engaged in anything. I think that could be quite a difficult, you know, emotional change for someone, and for them, sense of self, sense of purpose, sense of self-esteem. And I think we need to be much more careful about how that's managed as well. But on the other hand, you know, like, generally people in the army are highly motivated, proactive people as well. So it's not that everybody's a victim or anything or vulnerable. Generally, relative to the average person in society, I think people in the army are much more driven and much more effective at sort of making sure they make the most of their opportunities. So it's a two-way street, really.
You've spoken about your friends going away on tour and coming back angrier. How's that affected you, and how have you dealt with it?
I think it's just a natural. I mean, it's just some cases, I think particularly younger people can come back and it can be quite a frustration returning to a civilian environment where everybody's kind of caught up in superficial issues and materialistic issues, and they don't really understand the sacrifices that are made by people. I think that can be quite frustrating. It almost seems a lot of things in civilian life could seem trivial. I think that, certainly some of my friends, I think that was a frustration for them. But again, we're all much younger back then, so maybe it's just a function of just being younger as well and just being kind of frustrated at all that sort of stuff. But no, it's just something I found, and maybe it's something we could help with more as well, like people being able to access help when they need to deal with it. Also, a lot of people just frustrated that, you know, their friends were killed, and it's questioning why was it them and not, you know, not the other person, or, you know, what was the point of them dying? You know, that can be sometimes a difficult thing for people to reflect on. You know, not just for friends, but for the family as well.
There's a number of charities in the UK, British Legion, Veterans Scotland Support Line amongst many. Would you like to see these organisations fully funded by the government, or do you think we need to create something completely different? Well,
they all do fantastic work, obviously. You know, there's a recent one that's just been moved home over to Govan, Glasgow's Helping Heroes, which, you know, they're all doing fantastic work. You know, Erskine has been around for over 100 years, well, just about 100 years now. And, you know, they've been doing great work for a long time to help people. But the issue is there's a lot of them around, and they all offer different things. And it's also a case of sometimes they can operate in silos and be a bit fiercely independent of one another. And I don't think that's often helpful. I think if there was a central point of access for veterans through something like a National Veterans Service, where they can engage support and then be signposted to the most appropriate service. I think what we need is a much more hybrid form of state involvement and charitable involvement. They all do different things very well, but it's just making sure that it's kind of rationalised and organised a bit better, so that the right access is available to the right person at the right time, and people aren't slipping through the net, because there's a lot of people who are out there and are just not getting the help they need, and they don't know where to get help when they do need it.
So you reckon one place where everyone knows that's where you can go, that's where you can get the help, they've got the resources there, and that would be in addition to what's already out there at the moment?
Yeah, I think that would be an extra sort of structure that could help pull all these organisations together and give them a complementary function. I think that would be really helpful. Obviously, there's a role for charity, but I think the balance is very much swung against, relying on people's goodwill and sense of sort of charity, as opposed to the state stepping up and helping out, where it's got an obligation to people who have obviously served their country. I think often when people leave the books of the armed forces and the army, they're often just forgotten about, or they're no longer a problem. Often battalions and regiments will be focused on the operational side. They're running a day-to-day battalion to be combat effective. They're not necessarily going to be overwhelmingly concerned about what their veterans are doing. And particularly when the World War II generation dies out, which it will in the next 20 years or so, all the sort of traditional structures such as the Royal British Legion and all these things that were set up after the Second World, a lot of these are going to downsize significantly. And it's a question of, well, what social networks are available to support veterans in the longer term? Because the army is obviously much smaller than it was back in the end of the Second World War. You had over 1 million people in uniform. So what's this much smaller veterans network going to be like? And how will it help support each other? I think we have to reflect on how that's going to change, particularly given the intense active service that so many people have been through in the last 10, 15 years. Clearly there's a ticking bomb there of potential mental health issues that we need to address.
What's your thoughts on screening of people coming into the services to identify if there's any pre-existing conditions?
Well, I think there's a fairly robust medical that's carried out. I don't think it's necessarily focused on mental health. It's more about physical aspects. Many people are, will be rejected if there's a history of, certain medical conditions, both mental and physical. But in other ways, it's perhaps something we could look at. I'm not entirely au fait with how robust it is at present. I think the key thing is generally it's making sure people moving from a highly regimented and institutionalised environment into civilian life again are appropriately supported, making sure they're given productive and fulfilling roles to do, and not just simply cast adrift. And also for reservists that have engaged in active service overseas and have encountered some pretty harrowing situations, making sure that they're not just simply dumped back into civilian life again without any appropriate support network, because that could be even more surreal for people to come back from a very intense combat zone, and then next week you're going back to an office job, so I think that could be quite surreal for people to deal with, and maybe we could focus more on how reservists are being supported as much as regulars.
And the reservists getting much support at the moment?
Generally, it's a case of you'll decompress and then you'll be returned to unit and you'll go back to your civilian job, and there's very little maintenance of engagement there. You just return to either training or you'll leave. It's very informal. I mean, your veterans of all types, regular and reserve, can access support, but again, it's going back to this point about how well integrated is it and how easy is it to access. I don't think it's that easy to access.
Do you think you'll miss it once you leave?
Well, I've already left.
Yeah,
so I've finished my sort of 12 years. And given the pressures on my, so you can see from reading out my CV, I've done quite a lot. So it was quite difficult, particularly in the last couple of years, to maintain an active role in the reserves, because I was so heavily involved with my civilian job at BE, Scottish Enterprise, and then obviously gearing up to get elected to Parliament, which is an all-encompassing beast. It's one of these things like everybody, I all have fond memories of what I did. I had a great time, really enjoyed it, and it did a lot for me in my formative years and shaping me into the person I am today, enabled me to achieve what I have achieved and becoming a member of Parliament in many ways. So I have great affection for the Royal Regiment of Scotland, for what I did there, how I got involved with it. But that makes me also aware that I've got a great opportunity and a duty really to try and make sure I'm doing my best to sort of support those with a voice. As one of the few people who have an idea of what it means to have served in some capacity in the reserves, unlike most MPs, I have an understanding of it. I think it's a duty on me to sort of make sure that voice is given representation in Parliament, and I hope to do so. And that's part of why I raised this issue when the Daily Record approached me for my views on it. And I think it's important that this issue is taken back to Parliament as we come off of summer recess this week, and and is given a decent airing, and we reflect on what more we can do to try and support regular and reservists leaving the armed forces, and how we make sure that they are given a decent opportunity to make the best of their lives, but also given support to deal with some of the pretty horrific situations they may have went through.
What kind of feedback have you had from the article?
It's been fairly positive, yeah. There's been a lot of veterans who've got in touch saying thanks for raising the issues. You know, I was slightly uncomfortable that the story was a bit more about me than about the issue of PTSD, but I guess tabloids have to sell newspapers, and they kind of plastered my face on it, which I wasn't entirely comfortable with. But the fundamental issue is we have to work hard to deal with this issue. It's important to raise it, and I think some people may be uncomfortable with raising it, and in some cases I think some of the hierarchy in the army might be uncomfortable with it being raised, because it's you know, they're trying to recruit people and retain people, and sometimes that can be at odds with some of the issues, the uncomfortable issues, and that people have to deal with coming out of the armed forces. But nonetheless, it's important to raise it. But yeah, it's been very positive. Veterans organisations have been in touch about it, and I think there's generally an appreciation that people understand and are willing to raise it in Parliament. So no, I'm fairly comfortable with it going forward, and happy to help support where I can.
And what advice would you give to any of the veterans or any of the ex-regulars that are listening to this, and they're going through a difficult time at the moment?
Well, at the end of the day, there's always someone out there to help you. You know, there's a number of charities, as we've discussed, that can assist you, but also if you're finding problems with accessing the support you need, you can always come and see your local Member of Parliament. You know, certainly my door's always open to people that might need support, and I'm sure every one of the 650 Members of Parliament would be likewise. You know, so if there is a problem, don't hesitate to come and see your MP at a surgery and describe the issues you've got, whether it's a housing issue, whether it's about employment, or whether it's just about access to mental health or any other services that you might be finding difficulty with. You know, it's amazing what a letter with parliamentary headed paper can get for you. You know, so MPs will be more than happy to help.
Magic, Paul, thank you very much.
That's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's the Stephen Rowan Show.
It's Stephen Rowan.
Stephen Rowan. Stephen Rowan. Stephen Rowan.
Bringing you
Entertaining and inspiring guests.